Almost 4 years ago, I started my own podcast, and looking back at January 2020, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't the same person I am today, but in some ways, I actually was. And that's actually kind of what this episode is about. In this episode, I'm gonna talk about the 5 things I wish I had known back then, but I also think the only way I know them now is because I went through those 3.5 years. So we're just gonna dive into it. I'm gonna try and take it slow in this episode. This is a very personal milestone for me because today we are celebrating the 200th episode of, I want to say the FastForwardAmy show, but it's actually the Play to Win podcast because I have along the way changed the name, as that is one of the things I learned. So today we're gonna dive into those 5 lessons I wish I had known back in 2020 when I started as a business owner with this podcast. And I do want to share some stats with you because as I'm recording this episode, we've almost hit 400,000 downloads with this podcast. I often feel like I don't get enough weekly downloads. I don't get enough monthly downloads. And then I look at other people's podcasts. But what has really stuck out for me is the consistency of this podcast. And wow, almost 400,000 downloads. That is amazing. In total, with bonus episodes, we've published over 250 episodes. We have people listening from all over the world. And I'm really happy that back in 2020, I made that, according to other people, stupid decision to start this podcast. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to Play to Win, the show where we turn your passion into profits so you can live life on your own terms. I'm Amy van de Putte from FastForwardAmy, your host and coach, and I'll bring you a new episode with simple strategies every Tuesday. The first thing I learned over the course of these past few years is actually that nobody has your vision. And starting this podcast is actually a really great example of that, because what happened is when I wanted to start my podcast, my then boyfriend thought it was really weird and not that much of a good idea. Some people in my close environment told me like, it's free. Why are you going to do that? Shouldn't you be spending time on stuff that you're getting paid for? And I really stuck with my own vision back then. I was like, no, I really want to do the podcast. I wanted to do something really creative with my time because I felt like I was getting so stuck in my business that I wasn't getting around to letting that creativity loose. And I felt like, not everything needs to be super strategic or super paid. So I really wanted to do this for free and reach people all over the world. And I actually succeeded at that. But the lesson I learned is that what I did back there is actually something I should have kept doing, because over the years, I did lose a little bit of that spark, if I'm being honest. You might not think that of me because you might see me as a very assertive, very confident person, but that's not always the case in some areas of my life. Yes, in some areas, no. But what happened over the past couple of years is I started distrusting my own vision, and sometimes I had ideas and I listened to other people too much. Consultants, people in my close environment, again, people I was working with, and it actually cost me a lot of energy to recover from that. I really had to take a step back, which is also what I did in the past year, took a step back from some of my coaching programs to really have a look at wait a minute, if I check in with myself, what is my vision? What is my passion? Because at a certain moment, I was starting to make decisions out of fear. Someone told me a couple of months ago that I was going to lose my audience if I didn't get my shit together brand-wise. What that did to me is it was probably one of the worst things anyone could have said to me. If your business is your baby, you will know that that is a very, very hard thing to hear. And I got so scared that it got me to a point where I was afraid to make more decisions. And now looking back at that, 8 months later, after this person told me that, I'm thinking I really shouldn't have let someone who didn't have my vision tell me about the fact that my vision was wrong. So if there's just one thing I could tell Amy from 2020, it would be to keep trusting that intuition, keep sticking to your own vision, and only listen to someone else if they truly understand the vision or if they have any merit of speaking. I don't know how to say this, but I think what I just want to tell you and me is, and put this in a little time capsule, is no one really knows your long-term plans or your vision as well as you do. So if you are having trouble listening to that intuition, get on a plane by yourself, go to dinner by yourself, spend a few days alone, really tap into that white space and rediscover what makes you tick. Because your vision is unique and you shouldn't let other people's advice take that away from you. The second thing I wish I had known back then, but I actually kind of knew, but just didn't always implement, is consistency is key. And you've heard me say this before, and you're probably thinking, Amy, so obvious, and we know about the fact that you've posted your podcast every Tuesday. I think it's a double lesson in here, because back then I knew for my podcast it was really important that I would publish an episode every single Tuesday. By the way, in those 3 years and 8 months, I haven't... Wait, is it 3 years and 8 months or 2 years and 8 months? 3 years, 2020, 21, 22. Yeah, 3 years and 8 months. I haven't missed a single Tuesday. And I wish I had implemented that consistency in some other areas of my business. So if I would time travel back and I would tell 2020 Amy another thing, it's that consistency is key in many more things than you actually think. Because for the longest time, for example, I knew that during my coaching programs, it was really important that I showed up and showed reviews every week, and that I, posted my wait list on my stories. But many weeks I'd be like, oh, not this week, because this week there's other stuff in my stories. Or, oh, I'm not going to make the time for this. I'll do it tomorrow. And then I wouldn't do it. So where I've been so hyper consistent with my podcast, I did forget to implement that consistency in other areas, or I was a little bit lazy. And this is one of the things I'm taking with me into the last part of this year, into the next 2 years, is I've actually made an entire plan for my business for 2024 and 2025 for both of my businesses. And the key there is consistency and really boring. Like, the foundation is going to be really boring. And I think often as high achievers and as very creative people, multi-passion people, we start a business and we tend to go and fuck shit up because we're like, consistency is boring. We want to do new things. We want to be very innovative. But you get to be innovative. You get to be creative. But you don't get to be inconsistent. So I'm going to look at it for the future as having a very stable foundation. That's like the podcast every week. But the promotional material can change. I'm going to look at it as having a very stable core of my business and product suite. But the way I get leads in could be very new and through new funnels and all of that. But at the core, there needs to be consistency. And the reason I want to drive this home is because you will see other people out there who will be loud and talk about their one-hit wonders, or there will be unicorns out there who can post an episode once every so often and get a lot of downloads. But for us mere mortals like you and I'm not that special. Neither are you. You and I were not that special. So what we need to make sure that we actually work on is our consistency and trustworthiness. For some people, it might work that they just went up, wrote a book, and it becomes a bestseller. But for 99.9% of people, it doesn't work that way. They've already written 9 books and the 10th one becomes a success. They publish an episode every single week, and that is how they get all of the downloads. I know there are people out there who get 10,000 downloads on episodes, but I'm not one of them. Honestly, I'm really not one of them. It's the consistency that gets me the results, because I just don't give up. So make sure you don't give up on your consistency. Make sure you don't distract yourself with a bunch of new ideas all the time. I'm not saying don't work on the new ideas. I'm saying make sure that there is a baseline in your business that you always stick to, as well as it, like in your sales and in your marketing. Always be selling, always be marketing. And if you have time left over, go and get that innovation. The next lesson, and I'm going to be honest with you, I learned this lesson this week. So good thing that I learned it. And then I'm getting teary-eyed. Shit, am I gonna cry in the 200 episodes? Growth isn't linear, and sometimes it's the accumulated stuff that matters. So if I'm gonna be very honest with you, I already said it in the past, like the last piece, is that I've so often been disappointed with my podcast. I've so often thought, do I need to make a Dutch one? Do people just hate my accent? And I've forgotten to check the total downloads, so I checked it before this episode and I was like, holy fuck balls, almost 400,000 downloads. That is a lot, whilst having like around 8,000 to 9,000 downloads a month, sometimes lower, sometimes higher. That's amazing, actually. 400,000 downloads. My big goal is to have 1 million download podcast, and looking at this, we're getting there. it's incredible. I'm so happy with that. But I had this, like, the podcast doesn't actually make me cry. It's actually about the rest of my business. So one of the things that I did a lot in the past is get coached. So I got a lot of coaching, I bought a lot of courses, and those things really helped me grow. But then I had a little bit of a bad experience with a coach, and it kind of made me distrust some people. And I was like, yeah, I'm so busy. I have the team. I'll just keep, trudging. Is that a word? Trudging along by myself. And it took me a while to find new coaches, but now I have a couple of new coaches, a mindset coach, a business coach, a mastermind. Like, I have all the things. And because of that, I've been working on my mindset more again, and I can just feel myself grow and thrive and feel more supported. This is, I think, also what happens to our coachees in the Fast Forward Academy. We see this in our Business Freedom Elevator program. A lot of people are afraid if a group is bigger, and many people think they need one-on-one coaching, but in reality, people need a supportive environment and energy around them. And that is why bigger group programs like my Business Freedom Elevator are so good. But so what happened to me is 2 days ago, I was in a call with my mindset coach, Topsy, and I was telling her about the fact that I felt so disappointed in myself and in my business. And like, not really, like, this is because I'm proud of my business, but there's also like the high achieving layer that's been there since 2020 and before, because even as a kid, I had like massive fear of failure, which is very common for high achievers, because as high achievers, what drives you is getting results. And what your biggest flip side is, oh my God, what the fuck if I fail? So I definitely still have that. I'm not too proud to say that. You might recognize this. You're probably now thinking, Amy, you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. Well, right back at you. Don't judge me, because you are also often too hard on yourself. So I'm working on this, obviously. And I did this emotional intelligence test, and I was telling her how I felt disappointed, not because of my revenue, but I told her either I need my revenue or profits to go up, or I need the efficiency in my business to go up. And at that moment, neither was happening. My revenue hadn't gone up because of things that I will explain right now. And it felt like my business was chaotic as fuck in the process department. And we were talking about accepting the gray. And what I felt and what I realized in a moment is that I had been looking at everything as like either month by month or quarterly or yearly thing, but never accumulated. So this is the same as when I open Buzzsprout for my podcast episodes. I can look at just like all time, or I can look at accumulated, and you'll see it go up. And with my revenue, it was the same. I was like, yeah, my revenue this year is lower than last year. This was conscious, by the way. I'll say more about that. And it feels like my company hasn't really been very efficient. So I felt like a failure. Like, yeah, I must be fucking up if that's the case. And then she's like, okay, so, and what else has happened in the past year? And I was like, oh, well, I've made 2 entirely new courses, one in English, one in Dutch. I've launched an entirely new coaching program plus a brand. I've hosted 2 events, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, well, so it's not or profit or efficiency. In this case, it was we did a lot of development like I did a couple of years ago. And what I realized in that moment is 2 things. 1, growth isn't always per year. It's also accumulated over the past couple of years. In the past 4 years, since 2020, I have done over 5 million in sales. And if I say that number, I'm okay with it being a little bit lower this year, actually. Because 5 million in total and doing it over again and over again and over again is actually pretty fucking impressive. Okay, so 1 is the accumulated stuff, like with the podcast, like, okay, maybe you have a month where your downloads or your sales are lower, but what's the total of the past time? Like, what's the accumulated stuff? And the other thing is, what else did you accomplish? And what I learned there is that where I was disappointed is that I hadn't done a bunch of things yet that I knew I had to do. And what I realized is that I had to go through all of those learning points. I had to go through developing those new products. I had to go through managing the chaos and the efficiency in order to learn how to actually manage it. So the things I felt disappointed by were actually my biggest lessons in learning how I could make that happen. Because there are some things I've known for years and I haven't implemented. And I'm like, well, what the fuck, Amy, from 2 years ago? Why haven't you implemented it yet? But what I learned is that I had to go through those struggles to now become the person who is capable of doing that, who is capable of delegating, of leading, of not making the same mistakes, who is capable of being so consistent that she will put up the waitlist in her stores and stuff like that. I don't know if this is making any sense, but this episode is not for you. It is for me, and it's for the Amy of 3.5 years ago. And yeah, growth isn't linear, it's accumulated. And you have to accumulate all of those experiences through the ups and downs in order to get your final result and become your final you, be that in actual results or in the things you learn from it. But especially for a lot of starting entrepreneurs, I know a lot of my coachees look at their numbers month to month, and then I teach them like, okay, but look at it quarter to quarter. And now I realize I didn't even have to look at it year per year, but really accumulated. How many people in total have I helped and coach? How many people in total have listened? How many podcast episodes have I put out there? And I gotta say, I'm pretty fucking proud of everything that I've accumulated over these past few years. And I hope you are too. And if you're not feeling it, either go and look for the stuff you're proud of or go and do more stuff you want to be proud of. Fourth lesson for myself, for the Amy from 2020, is not everything has to be a smart decision. Again, when I started my podcast, people thought it was a stupid idea. And in hindsight, it was actually a very smart and strategic decision because a lot of the people who listened to my podcast actually became clients later on. But what I want to add is not everything actually has to be a smart decision. A few months ago, I started a super secret, smaller group coaching program with some past coachees, and I have had a lot of fun in that, and they are super happy. And it was not strategic, it was just fun. And if I scroll back through my photos from the past couple of years, from I think the past 7 years, I always find merch in my stories like files. So this is an example of merch. I'm holding one of the mugs I designed myself. Last week, someone told me all of my fonts and how I design them is atrocious. And I get what they're saying. And still, I have fun with these stupid mugs I've designed every single day. I made myself sweatpants and joggers. This merch has no strategic goal. I mean, it could have a strategic goal of like, oh, people walking around with my brand and everything. But I've also learned that sometimes you gotta just really, really do the fun stuff. And I think it's kind of like leave some room in your calendar for the unproductive stuff. Leave some room in your business for the stuff that has no strategic value other than it is fun. And you will, by the way, also see that those things will actually get you a lot of results, like accidentally probably, but not everything has to be strategic, not everything has to be smart. You get to launch a product that isn't going to be wildly profitable, but you really want to make it. You get to design something that isn't going to bring in revenue, but you really love it. Not everything has to be so smart and responsible. And the final lesson is one that actually cost me a lot of money over these past couple of years, and it is that you gotta find what your good enough is. So what I teach in my business school, the Fast Forward Academy, is perfectly imperfect. And perfectly imperfect, what I mean by that is not write a bunch of spelling mistakes. What I mean by perfectly imperfect is actually that you want to do the big stuff and you want to do the new stuff and you want to try things, and it doesn't always have to be perfect. And this is like I told one of our coaches to start her new podcast. I was like, you don't need a microphone, you don't need fancy stuff or a fancy jingle. Just start recording it on your phone and that will be good enough. This is an example of perfectly imperfect. And I started out like that, but I didn't continue like that. And I don't necessarily regret it. None of these things I truly regret because I think they all got me to where I am today. But I do wish I could tell myself this because as I was growing and as my business was growing, I started to feel like I couldn't get away with perfectly imperfect anymore because people were starting to look up to me. And there were certain expectations. I felt like I couldn't make ugly videos on YouTube because my Instagram had gotten quite famous. I felt like my branding had to be on point. And at a certain point, this resulted in me hiring a professional team for my hair and makeup and the professional setup of the studio and the recordings, and everything got super expensive. But that's okay, actually. I might actually still consider doing that again. But what was less in line with my values was actually the whole hair and makeup situation, because what happened is, although I love the people who did that obviously, is I had to sit in a chair for 2 hours and talk to someone really early in the day, and I couldn't do my workout. And then I would actually look at the videos, and although the makeup and the hair was done professionally, I felt like I didn't look like myself. So once I finally had the whole episode of like the perfect recording day and the perfect hair and the perfect makeup and the outfit and everything, I just looked at it and was like, okay, was this what I was looking for? And I realized that's not it. My good enough is the episode really good? Was I really honest and real and raw? And do I look like myself? And if someone listens to that podcast episode, will they be motivated? The audio and the video didn't have to be perfect. It had to be good enough on my terms. So if you catch yourself looking at other people and taking their standard as your own, just ask yourself, is this your good enough or their good enough? Chances are they're in a different chapter. I used to look up so much to Marie Forleo, and I was like, oh my god, why don't my videos look like hers? Well, she had a professional team at the time when I didn't, and she'd also been at it for a few years longer than I had, and I realized like, oh, I don't have to do her standard, I get to do mine. And my standard is that I am upbeat and high energy, and well, I'm not super high energy in this episode because I was just crying, but I am actually really happy to be here. I am really happy that I get to be myself on this podcast with the people in the room with me, because this is my good enough. My good enough is just about the content of what I'm saying and if this can help someone move forward, because that's what Fast Forward is all about, is the action. So I guess lesson to self, not everything has to be perfect. Perfect actually doesn't exist because everyone has a different standard of it, and find your good enough. And I think what will help you define that is base it on your own values. Fun is one of my values, so I want what I do to be fun. These are only a few of the things I've learned over the past couple of years, and believe me, there are many, many, many more lessons and principles where that came from. I learned to not take my foot off the gas pedal and not push the brake too much. I learned to not listen to other people. I learned to... I don't know, I can't even begin to explain to you how many things I've learned over the past few years, and I'm grateful to all of those lessons. Those aren't failures, those are lessons that got me to this point, and they've also turned me into a much better business coach, because at a certain point, I got a little bit afraid. I was like, what if I get too far in my business and I can't coach my own coachees anymore because I'm too far away from them? And luckily, I've discovered that over the past couple of years, I've just bumped into the same patterns as at the beginning of my business. I had to stop listening to other people. I had to follow my intuition. I had to focus on one core product. And those are the things that you need to be doing in your business as well. If you're currently struggling and you're like, well, Amy, I want to do all this, but I'm just genuinely super overwhelmed. People keep giving me advice. I don't know who to listen to. I'm literally overwhelmed because I don't know if I should be working on my website or if I should be making an Instagram, and should my profile picture be my face or not, and what do I do? Like if any of this overwhelm is something you feel, or if on the other hand, you're like, yeah, Amy, I mean, I did all the things, but now I'm in that same situation like you, like I'm floating around. I don't know what to do anymore. It might be that you are in a situation I was in the past year where you just need some guidance and support and energy. So if you're feeling low energy or too scared to get started, it doesn't matter in which chapter of your life or business you are in, you are always welcome to join me in my academy for some coaching. So I like to believe that sometimes what we give people is the thing that we actually need, and the thing that I needed in these past 2 years was support and people who got me. And that is actually exactly what I offer inside of my business coaching programs. And side effects of following my coaching might include increased confidence, higher energy, higher sex drive, bigger bank account. Those are all good side effects, actually. But I don't know. What can I say? I think business coaching, yes, you will make a lot more money and you will have more fun in your business. You'll be able to make money from your passion. But what isn't talked about enough is the mindset part. And I know mindset doesn't really sell, but I do want to say this because I don't say this often enough. The value of getting coached, the value of having people around you that are on the same page or a little bit further ahead, or maybe I'm much further ahead in some areas and in other areas I'm not. Like having some people pulling you forward so that you don't have to do all of the pulling in your life and business. You can't really put a price on that. And I'm actually opening, my coaching program is actually open right now for the very last time this year. So this is the only chance you can get at getting coached by me this year and my amazing team who are so supportive. So if you're feeling like, yeah, this is what I need 12 weeks of intense focus. We're almost getting started. I would love to see you inside of my Business Freedom Elevator, because this year we designed a 12-week program where we're going fast. That's why it's called the Fast Track. And we're helping all of our clients to really take those next steps they need before the end of the year. And we're even closing off the program with a real-life in-person event. This round of the program is in Dutch. In its future, we might do it in English, but this round is fully in Dutch. So if you're in Belgium or the Netherlands or anywhere else but you speak Dutch, I'd love to welcome you. And if you want some more information about that program and how it can get you to that more confident and freedom-filled business owner status, you can find all of that through fastforwardamy.com/elevator. You can find the link in the description. And if you have any questions for me, you can just always shoot me a DM on Instagram. Or what's even better is if you want to talk to someone because you're like, I don't know if this is right for me, like, am I in the right phase of my life for this? Maybe I'm too much of a beginner, or maybe I'm too far ahead. I know that there's a lot of questions popping up about that. You can always just book in a call with someone on my team. Sometimes I do these calls, sometimes my team members do these, and you can always access a free call that's like one-on-one, totally private, through fastforwardamy.com/findyourfitcall. And I'll add the links to the description of this episode as well, okay? I hope you have a really nice fucking day. Have a look at these 5 things that I had to learn over these past years, and maybe you find some that you need to do less of. I don't know, like maybe being a little bit more proud of your accumulated growth, and maybe listening a little bit less to other people, and maybe having a little bit more fun in your life and business. I hope this gave you some inspiration. Cheers to 200 episodes plus 50 bonus episodes. And talk to you next week, Tuesday, in another episode of the Play to Win podcast.